So I've left Daria downstairs today so that her snoring wouldn't be a feature of the video today. She was sound asleep down on her bed downstairs, so I thought she might like to just stay there today. I'm going to finish this border of white because it's an easy stitch while I chat with you. It's Friday again, best day of the week. Even if you're not watching this on a Friday, it's still the most fun day of the week for me. It has quickly become to spend a few minutes just relaxing, having a bit of a chat, and knowing that you guys are watching this and you have similar interests to me. Getting to know you guys on Instagram and Facebook. It certainly makes the world seem quite small. Someone started a thread the other day on the Facebook group, which you can find if you haven't heard about it. It's a Facebook group called Friday Off the Grid. It's a closed group. So I know that sometimes I don't join groups on Facebook if I'm concerned that, if I'm liking a bunch of pictures or whatnot, that, those sorts of things are going to start showing up on my friends' feeds because they already think I'm crazy enough. I like the fact that it's a closed group. So what we talk about, what we share, remains just for us. So if you're a stitcher and you would like to join that community, again, it's called Friday Off the Grid, and we have lots of people now joining in with us every weekend, and frankly all week long, recording Stitch With Me videos so that we can all visit together, and it's pretty fun. Anyways, getting back to my original point, someone posed a question the other day on the Facebook group asking where everybody was from, which I thought was a really cool question, because we have almost 600 members now, and our members of the group are far flung all over the world. We have someone from Iceland, which I think is the coolest thing ever. We have the Netherlands, we have, all over the United States. We have just so many places all over the world. We've got Linda in Korea, and I love that this is becoming a truly global thing. I think it's fascinating. So I thought I would share a little bit. I was thinking the other day about this sort of weekend community get together that we're all sort of enjoying now. And I thought I would share a memory of, why I enjoy this. And it's it was an idea that I remembered from back in, I had to look this up. I used to have an old blog before Off the Grid Needlearts, and I am not going to tell you the name of that blog because it's, it was a long time ago, and anyways, some things are better left alone. But anyways, in my old blog, back in 2008, 2009, there was a similar type thing that was hosted every Friday night by a blog called Let's Stitch. And I had to look this up on my old blog post to remember what it was called. And of course, I, at the time, had not included a link said blog, or if I had, that link is now gone. I was not able to track down any other information about this particular event that used to happen. But I am betting donuts to dollars that at least a few of you who are watching this probably remember this, because it was a lot of fun. It was quite popular with people who had blogs, stitching blogs at the time, where Friday was basically a sit-in, a stitch night, all around the world. And if you had a blog, you could post about it on your blog. And the premise was basically that everyone started at 6 p.m. their time zone, and they stitched until midnight their time zone. And we would share pictures of our progress, what the piece looked like at 6 p.m. when you started, and then what the finished piece looked like at midnight when you were finished your Friday stitch along. And I can remember feeling absolutely thrilled that it was this sort of global event that I was participating in. And, I told my husband, look, I can't do anything tonight because it's Friday night, it's stitch along night from 6 p.m. to midnight. I need to set up my things and have everything ready to go. And I'm going to be stitching with stitchers all over the world. And so, memories of that have carried with me for years and years. And so I feel by doing this, we are simply carrying on in a video format what was started in blog format years ago. I'm really hoping that someone out there has a little more information on maybe the person who started this, or just more information about whether you were also involved in this and you remember what I'm talking about, because it was really fun. And so I'm hoping that this is the kind of thing that will be exactly like that. I'm thinking that next Friday I may do something similar. After I've posted the video, I may sit down 6 p.m. my time, and because I like to have my video done and recorded, edited, and uploaded. I try to have it done by, in between 5 and 8 p.m. So I'm going to try really hard to have it done and ready and up by 6 p.m. my time, so that I can sit and tell my family that I'm sorry, it's Friday night from 6 p.m. until midnight. This is my time to stitch with stitchers all over the world. I think he'll buy it. What do you think? Think I can get away with it? I think I can. He's pretty understanding. So what do you say? You want to join with me? We can post our pictures on Facebook. We can post our pictures on Instagram. You name it, we can do it. And I think it'd be a lot of fun. We certainly have enough videos that are out there in the FlossTube world that we can watch. There are a ton of Stitch With Me videos now. There are a ton of regular FlossTube episodes being done by so many amazing stitchers. There certainly is not a shortage of wonderful stitching friends to watch all over the world. So I think that sounds like fun. What do you say? Are you in? I hope so. If so, I'll see you next Friday at 6 p.m. and we'll see what I can finish by midnight. Okay, so I'm done. I'm just kind of playing with the rest of this white here while I'm chattering away. I should try to maybe use up the rest of this white while my needle's loaded. There's a bit of snow in the roof. I guess I'll just go ahead and stitch what I can with what's left on my needle. I posted a question on Facebook right before I sat down to record this video, because I thought it might be nice to see if anyone had anything in particular that they wanted to talk about or for me to discuss. And I had some really lovely questions posed in like the first half hour. So of course, I record this video using my phone, so I'm not going to be able to check if there were any new questions asked while I'm recording this video. But if I've missed any questions, what I'll do is I'm going to save them up, and then I will continue this little series of question and answer on next Friday's video. Now, this is going to be the last Friday that I stitch Frosty Forest because I would really like to get back to my landmark design. Arjesh? No, it's not Arjesh. Letitia Crafty Curator is doing Arjesh. I'm doing Sassoon. I can't even remember the title of it. But you know the one I mean. My landmark design that I've got on the go. That's going to be what I would like to work on for the next few weeks for my Stitch With Me videos, because they are very easy to stitch while I'm talking and I don't have to concentrate very hard on the counting and making mistakes and things like that. So anyways, I'll look at that. I did 7 stitches. Maybe I can eke out an 8th. So before I get into the Facebook questions, I'm going to answer a question that I just received through YouTube. And this was a question from, I believe your username is Stitchin' Texan or Stitchin' Texas. I can't remember which one it was, but it was one or the other. And she mentions that she stitches the same, she threads her needle the same way that I do and stitches the same way with the eye of the needle in the middle of the one length of thread when it's the DMC. And her question was, when I'm stitching two-handed, which hand is on the top and which hand is on the bottom? When I'm stitching two-handed, my dominant hand, I am right-handed, my dominant hand is underneath and my left hand is on top because it's easier to poke the needle through where you can see what you're doing with your non-dominant hand than it is for, your right hand. My right hand, because I'm right-handed, my dominant hand, pardon me, has an easier time from the back of the fabric. And so that's why I do it that way. She also wanted to know what size of needle I prefer on a 28 to 32 count. And my answer to that at the moment is a size 28 needle. That's always been the size that I've preferred probably for the last 10 years. And using a 26 feels very, very unusual. It feels very large. And so, however, I was watching Abby Bella's Stitch With Me video from a few weeks ago. Hers is called Off the Grid Monday, The Hangover. It's quite funny. And she's a beautiful stitcher. And she had some very interesting things to say about needle size that she had learned from, oh dear, and I've completely forgotten who she mentioned that she learned it from. Maybe Abby will jump in here and leave a comment below. I know she knows exactly what I'm talking about. She learned from someone who knew what they were talking about that most of us are using a needle that is too small for our fabric, and we should actually be using a needle that creates a bit more of a hole in the fabric as it pushes through the fabric, because it's creating more room for the thread to pass through the hole, creating less friction and less stress on your thread, thereby making the thread last longer, making the thread look better when it lies, so on and so forth. And I had never heard that before, and I thought that was a really fascinating point. Whether or not that's going to get me to change my needle size, I don't know. Abby. I am pretty set in my ways about my size 28s. So I'm not too sure about that, but I do believe it. I believe that it is true. As to whether or not I'm not going to be stubborn enough to try it, I don't know. I certainly like these 28s. So that, I believe, took care of Stitchin' Texas question. Stitchin' Texan. And thank you so much for sending me that. I thought that was a great question about which hand is on top, because I certainly love stitching two-handed. I find it very, very quick and easy on the hands and the arms? That is a question I receive all the time, because obviously not everyone can watch every single video. So for those who have heard me give this information before, please be patient. We have lots of people who are new to the video, lots of people who are watching for the first time. So I will be receiving some questions numerous times, and I am always happy to answer them. And besides, you guys are all stitching anyways, so you won't mind if I answer questions again, will you? So the question that I get probably the most often is, what kind of a stitching stand are you using? I'm just going to count here for a minute. 4, 5, 6. 6, okay. What kind of a stitching stand do you use? And I am happy to answer that question 100 times over, because I have been nothing less than absolutely thrilled with my stand. If this is a stand that was handmade by a very small business out in Calgary, Alberta, and the name of the company is called Hearthside Craftworks. And again, they're in Calgary, Alberta, and the particular model that I'm using is called the Mark II floor frame. So the Mark II floor frame from Hearthside Craftworks in Calgary, Alberta. And they have a website. You can order from them. I bought mine directly through Thread and I. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There we go. I bought mine directly from Thread and I. And Kathy and Neil also carry extra scroll rods and knobs and things like that I have been known to purchase on occasion, because I don't like to switch out my projects all that often from the scroll rods, but I do like to change up what I'm working on. So my solution is to buy another set of scroll rods when there's a project that I'm desperate to start. I will buy another set of scroll rods and start that project. So maybe not the most cost-effective way of doing things, but I don't play golf. I don't do other expensive things. This is it for me. This is my hobby. This is where all of my disposable income goes. That is the truth. All of my disposable income goes on craft. I've told you this before. I rarely go clothes shopping. I hate it. I will wear my clothes until they fall off me. So my money goes to things that make me happy. And this makes me very, very happy. So my floor frame, I've had it for about 10 years, and I use it every day. Sometimes it gets a little squeaky, but as you can see, today is a good day. Probably has something to do with the humidity in the room. But it might squeak a little bit, but it has never done anything except be absolutely smooth as butter. Flipping the frame back and forth to and start and end my threads, which I love. And it's made of oak. It's a very, very well made solid oak frame, and I couldn't have asked for a better Christmas present. Those many, many years ago, it was a joint present from all of the members of my immediate family. They all gathered together and purchased it for me. So it was a very, very special treat, and one that I use all the time. So there you go. That's another question that I'm asked very frequently. And I think now I should be able to get to those Facebook questions. So I took a picture of the questions on my iPad because I knew I wouldn't be able to double check them on my phone since I'm using it to record. So let me just bring those questions up. Technology, right? Taking a picture on your iPad instead of using a pen and paper. Isn't that ridiculous? Honestly. Okay, so now my very first question was from one of my very best friends, Adrian, who is my fiber friend. I have two fiber friends, the girls who I record the Fiber Friend podcast with every other week. It's a knitting podcast. And Adrian is also a stitcher. And she's also a member of the Facebook group. So she saw my question come through. And even though I had spent 2 hours with Adrienne this morning at the fabric store, she still decided to ask me a cheeky question. I guess it's not really cheeky, but she knows me really well, so she already knows the answer to this question. Her question is, how do you decide what to stitch on? What catches your eye? Now, because Adrienne knows me so well, she knows that I am very easily distracted. And so her question, what catches your eye? Well, the answer to that is, what doesn't catch my eye? I think that's really the problem. How do you decide what to stitch on? Well, are we talking about stuff that's already in my stash? Are we talking about new projects that I see on Instagram and I immediately say, oh my goodness, I just have to stitch that? Well, that's part of my problem, isn't it? How do you decide what to stitch on? I stitch on whatever it is that I'm in the mood for at that particular moment. And that is absolutely 100% the reason why I never have a lot of finishes. Because the second part of it, what catches your eye? Generally, the shiniest thing, the shiniest nickel for me is going to be the really huge, elaborate projects. The more elaborate, the more ridiculous, the more I'm drawn to it. So, just one of these little frosty forests would be adorable. But is that good enough? No. I have to have all 9. And I have to stitch all 9 on one piece of fabric, right? Because I can't just do one. There's a set. And I have to do them all. So that's a tricky question. How do I decide what to stitch on? Well, today I felt like stitching this, but only because I had told you that I was going to work on this during this video. Frankly, I've been thinking a lot about my landmark design and thinking, I really would like to put that back on the floor frame and get working on that. So I compromised because I had said I was going to work on this. I'm going to work on it today. I'm also going to try and finish it over this weekend. Maybe. And then I'm going to move on to the landmark for next week for this video. We'll see. I have to count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're good. And then we'll move to the left. So that was Adrienne's question. The next question came in from Craig. And Craig is from Scotland and has very quickly become a very dear friend. Even though we've never met in real life, I feel like we're a couple of kindred spirits. And Craig's question was about my Needlecraft story. How did you start? Who taught you? Is there any fibercraft, needlecraft, or general crafty type things that you still want to try or learn? Well, Craig, I have shared my Needlecraft story before, but again, there's always lots of people who are joining us for the first time. So just very briefly, I started cross-stitching when I was a teenager, after my mother took me to a museum exhibit where they had a display on arts and crafts done from a few hundred years ago, and the sorts of leisure activities that would have occupied young children back in the day. And the museum gift shop was selling some cross-stitch kits for pin cushions that would have been sort of reminiscent of a style that would have been stitched by young children back in the day. And so my mother purchased a kit for me, and I took it home and I taught myself. My mother had done crewel work before, and that's a craft that I have never tried. I've never tried crewel work. I can never say that without it sounding like cruel. And I'm sure that's because of my Canadian accent. But anyways, there you go. That's one that I've never tried. Never really been totally drawn to it, but I admire it. I like the way it looks, but it's never been one that I've really wanted to try. But my mother had done crewel work before. She'd also done basic needlepoint, but she'd never done cross stitch. And so I believe she probably helped me learn how to thread the needle. And then I simply followed the directions that came in the kit and went from there. And I think I probably asked my mom a few questions if I went off kilter with a few things. She had basic sewing ability and knowledge at the time. And so I suspect I probably asked her many more questions than I remember. But other than that, that's how I started. She tried to teach me how to knit before that when I was quite young, but I did not have the patience for it. And my tension was way too tight. And so as I was knitting across the row, it got tighter and tighter and tighter, and really, really terrible. Very, very stressful. And I got very angry with it, and probably very angry with my mother, my poor mother. So I gave up. And it wasn't until years later when I was pregnant with Sarah and decided to give it another try that knitting actually took hold. So that's basically my Needlecraft story. Now, the second part of the question, is there any Firacraft, Needlecraft, or general crafty type things that I still want to try or learn? There are very few crafts that I come across that I am not interested in trying. I have mentioned before that I own a loom, and the loom has been sitting in my living room for 2 years, and I have yet to figure it out. That's high on my list of priorities, but I need to find some time. And what I plan to do is I plan to hire a teacher to come to my house and help me learn how to use it. That's my plan. Hopefully this year, and so that it won't be sitting there for another year. My husband is very patient. He has made a couple of comments about it, but for the most part, he's extraordinarily patient with the fact that this enormous thing, I mean, it's not the largest floor loom that you can get, but it's pretty darn big. It takes up enough room in our living room. So I should be thankful that he's as patient as he is. So yes, weaving, that is something that, I have taken a weaving course before, but it was on a tabletop loom. It was a 4-harness tabletop loom. And at the time, the woman who taught me was a truly amazing weaver, but I'm not sure that she was the best teacher because I didn't really... lots of people learn different ways, and I really needed a little bit more guidance in what I was doing, because generally if I'm shown something quickly, I can pick it up, but whether or not I remember it, I need to repeat things many, many times in order for it to stick. So anyways, weaving, that's a long answer to that question. Anyways, the other crafts that I still want to try, I think I've pretty much done them all. There was the one that I tried that I didn't really take to was tatting. And you would think tatting would be way up my alley because it's tiny and perfect and, really, really perfect for people who have sort of obsessive tendencies, because it is so minute and tiny, and you do the same thing over and over and over and over again. But it was very frustrating because I really struggled to undo the knots in the mistakes that I made. And I'm sure I would have done better if I'd been a bit more patient, but at the time I wasn't. So anyway, I still can't say I didn't enjoy it. I guess that's about it. Craig, thanks for the question. Now, let's see, what else have we got? Carla asked a great question. Carla asked, which part of the process do you enjoy the most? Planning, starting, making it to the finish, the FFO, or somewhere in between? And I think that is a marvelous question because we're all very, very different, aren't we? And I think it's fascinating to find out what other people think about their favorite part of the process. For me, my most favorite part is the planning and the starting. And I think that you are all starting to know me well enough that you know that that is true. I absolutely adore dreaming about it, planning it, kitting it up, and then putting those first few stitches in are so satisfying. I actually often feel, when I come to the end of a project that has been so unbelievably, such a big part of my life for so long, there's a bit of a letdown at the end when the project is done. I'm just checking my... There we go. Okay. When the project is done, it's like a bit of a loss. There's that loss of that sort of pleasure from your life. When I finished Ink Circles, the Cirque des Circle earlier last summer, and when you're done and you look at it and you think, well, okay, that's great. What's next? And you think this is a huge accomplishment. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, that's great. It's done. Now what's next? And so for me, the real pleasure comes in the physical act of doing. I want to be making. I want to be doing. I want to be using my hands all the time. And so the actual finished project, the actual finished product, it's secondary for me. In all honesty, it is completely secondary. I feel slightly differently about my knitting. I have started enjoying more this year wearing the things that I make, specifically cowls and shawls, wraps. I have a fair number of finished ones now, and I love wearing them. And so I am deriving a lot of pleasure from my finished knitted objects. Also I have a few finished quilts that I have done. And I also, it brings me tremendous joy to see my family using them. The same with knitted blankets on the couch. To see my family actually using them, I do get a lot of pleasure from that. But as far as my stitching goes, I have to say my stitching in particular, that's the one craft for me that 95% of my pleasure and enjoyment is in the process, completely the process. And I love it. I really love it. Just the act of that first stitch when you sit down and you pull the needle, you pull the thread through the fabric and you just think, all of your problems, maybe not all of your problems, but it's just like taking a breath, just like taking a little pause, a little breath, a little break. And it's pretty great. I wouldn't trade that for much. So great question, Carla. Thank you. Now, I should say here that Craig then wrote again on the same post, and he said, I could probably sit and ask you questions all day. Like you, I could talk the hind legs off a donkey. Ha ha. Craig, very funny, which is totally true. But then he says, is there a dream pattern or design that you'd love to stitch on? And Craig, that's a great question. And yes, the answer is yes, 1,000,000 times yes. Could I pick one? No, 1,000,000 times no. There are too many, my friend. There are just too many. And designers are so talented and amazing that they keep coming out with new things that I want to make and stitch. And it's a little frustrating that I don't have more time to work on these amazingly beautiful things because I want to make them all. I want to make them all. I've been drooling over the Ufendel sisters sampler charts, and I did not get in on time to buy some. And I know Mary, Stitcher 211, had sent me a name of a person to try to maybe find them, and which I greatly appreciated. But then I decided instead to go with a couple of long dog samplers that I have been dreaming about since I discussed them with Letitia, the crafty curator, who is she is really my long lost stitching sister, who I've never met in real life, but I feel like we know each other inside and out because we're like exactly the same person. And Letitia had sent me a photograph of a long dog sampler that was English paper piecing, literally cross-stitched English paper piecing. And oh my goodness, what's it called? Something, if there's bees on it, the quilted bee. I think it's called the quilted bee. And it is stunning. And it looks like English paper piecing. And so that for me is like a dream pattern. And the other one, and who is stitching that right now? Who is stitching it? And I can see your little Instagram icon because all of your stitching projects are beautiful, and I can't remember your name. And she is stitching the Hoity Toity, which is another sampler from Long Dog, and it is stunning. So I have to say I'm pretty partial to Long Dog samplers. Big surprise, right? I do have the Death by Cross Stitch started, which is kind of funny how much I have started. Maybe I'll show that on Monday, because that's definitely from the stash pile. So yeah, I'm very, very drawn to long dog samplers. So I guess those would be dream patterns or designs for me, but it would be really hard to narrow it down. Definitely hard to narrow it down. So thanks, Craig. Thanks for sending me some questions. You made me laugh. Okay, let's see. What else have I got here? So Casey sent me a question. I should end this thread here. Chitter chatter. Casey sent me the question, English paper piecing. What have you made or plan to make? Any ideas for smaller projects to make with EPP? What other types of quilting or sewing crafts do you like? I just got a sewing machine for Christmas and I want to try to learn to sew, but I'm not sure where to start except for tiny pillows out of my small cross-stitch pieces. That's a great question, because so many people who are like us, crafters, we all like to go down that rabbit hole of new crafts and new things to do. And for certain, getting a sewing machine is pretty exciting. And I think that, starting with making tiny pillows out of your cross-stitch designs is the perfect place to start. I think that's pretty perfect. Now, you may want to start with one that's not very precious to you, just in case, because let me tell you, the other thing that you want to know about sewing, the expression, as ye sow, so shall ye rip, is very, very close to the truth. Have your seam ripper close to hand, and don't practice on the pillow. Don't practice on the thing that you're going to make. Get some scrap fabric and practice, sewing a straight line, sewing a 1/4 inch seam, sewing 2 pieces of fabric together and having the seam be straight, and just, practice. It's a little trickier than just, picking up a piece of Aida and learning how to cross stitch for the first time. But once you get the hang of it, it's just like any other skill. It just takes some practice, and then once you've got the hang of it, you're off to the races. So once you can sew a straight line, you should be able to put together a little pillow, finish for your cross-stitch projects like an ornament, very, very easily. It just takes a bit of practice. There are so many wonderful tutorials online now of things to help you learn how to use your machine. As far as English paper piecing goes, what have I made or what do I plan to make? Well, the truth to that question, the truth to the answer to that question is that I have actually never really finished anything with my English paper piecing. And here's a little truth bomb about the episode that I filmed during Vlogmas, the final episode that I made where I was going to make that bag for Kathy. It didn't work out the way that I wanted it to. It didn't look the way that I wanted it to. I wasn't happy with the finished product in the end, so I never ended up giving it to her. So I can't even really count that as a finish. But you know what? I had fun doing it, and I had fun trying it. And I think that's what the beauty of craft is learning from your mistakes and learning what works and what doesn't. So what have I made? What do I plan to make? For me, I said this at the beginning of the video. I am drawn to huge scale projects. The smaller pieces fitting together to make a giant whole is what really floats my boat. And so the project that I'm really working on with my English paper piecing is, I've lost my thread. Oh, there it is. A queen size quilt. I have talked about it before, but what I'll do is I'm going to insert a picture of that quilt in progress. I think I had posted it on my Instagram feed early 2016. I haven't done a lot more on it, only because normally I work on my English paper piecing in the summer at the cottage, because it's quite light and I can hold it on my lap and it doesn't make me overheated like my knitting does, because obviously at the cottage we have no air conditioning, and so I choose lighter projects. However, last summer was when Evertotes was really sort of taking off, and I spent a lot of last summer sewing. So anyway, so a queen size quilt, that's what I'm working on. The other project that I started with English paper piecing was a twin size quilt for my daughter. And I was doing that one in sort of what's called a grandmother's flower garden pattern, which is where, and I have a hexagon flower here to show you. Whoops, dropping a bunch of stuff. Okay, so this is a hexagon flower from my queen size quilt. So these are there's 19 different fabrics that I'm using. It's a fabric collection that I purchased back in 2011. And so that's when I started it, was 2011. This is not a fast, long, this is a long-term project. And you know what? I have loved every minute of it. I don't think of this as something that I want to finish quickly. I'm in this, once again, for the process. And you know what? If I ever eventually finish this, I'll start another one, and it will be exactly the same, another queen size quilt, because it floats my boat. It makes me really, really happy. And so you can see the back of it. There's all of my stitches together. And so a grandmother's flower garden has, it's different in that you've got a center color, and then all of the outside petals of the flower are the same. And then you'll either do the outside with a third color, or you can use the inside of the flower color to make a border around each flower, and then you connect them together. And so you'll have a flower, border, etc., etc. for the entire quilt. So grandmother's flower garden. But this one is just a scrappy hexagon quilt, and I love it. I really, really love it. One day it'll be finished. So Casey, thanks for asking. I hope that helped you think about what you'd like to do. Okay, I had one last question, and this was from Heather. And again, this is one last question that I received right before I started recording. So if there have been others come in since and I've missed them, I'm sorry. I'll catch them next Friday. Heather says, what would be your dream pattern to stitch if you haven't stitched it already? And I think that I pretty much answered that when I talked about Craig's question. But the rest of her question is, how did you make so many different stitchy friends? And what is your favorite project bag that you've ever made? And oh, I think those are really, really great questions. So to start with, how did you make so many different stitchy friends? 100%, 100% because of my local needle workshop, Thread and I. That's the answer right there. When I was pregnant with my daughter, I went into Thread and I for the very first time to find fabric and materials to make these Winnie the Pooh pieces that I wanted to make for her nursery. And that's when I met Kathy and Neil for the very first time. So that was back in 2000. Yeah, that was back in 2000. So 17 years ago, I walked into that shop. And over the next couple of years, I, of course, went back to that store many times. We started chatting. We struck up our own friendship. And then Kathy said, there are some retreats that we host as a shop that we think you might like to come to, and would you like to come? And so I said, yeah, here's my credit card and when and where, and I'll be there. And it was through those retreats, through Thread and I, that I met women from my area. And of course, Neil, Kathy's husband, Neil's a man. He's a stitcher as well. He's an amazing stitcher, by the way. And he's also the framing half of their business. And so going to these retreats is really how I started making my stitching friends. And it grew from there. And that's how the community grew. Then I started, I met Adrian and Louise. Adrian I had met through Thread and I. And then early last year, late 2015, I met Louise, who decided to come to one of the retreats by herself. And thank heavens she did, because Adrian and I grabbed onto her. And our other friend, Tracy, who is a member of Tracy, you might see Tracy on Friday Off the Grid on the Facebook group. Tracy is also my friend who I introduced you to, who stitched that amazing Star Wars piece for her nephew Aiden. It's an incredible, incredible labor of love that she stitched. And then I'm through Louise, I met more knitters, because Louise is a knitting teacher here in the city. And if you're a knitter in London, you know Louise. And so, I have been extremely fortunate to meet the friends that I've met and have the amazing friendships, because let's face it, as an adult, it is very difficult to meet new friends, to meet new people. And I have met so many who live in my own city, and I feel very lucky indeed. And now that I've started these videos, I'm making new friends all over the world. So if you are even remotely considering recording your own floss tube videos, I highly recommend it. It's a ton of fun. And you know what? If you would never be caught dead recording your own floss tube video, that's awesome too, because it's okay to be shy. It's okay to watch from the sidelines, because that's fun too. We're all different people, aren't we? Not everybody can talk in public for an hour. I can't seem to shut up. But anyways, that's just me. We always need somebody to listen to us, don't we? The talkers always need someone to listen. So being a listener is just as important as being a talker, and you're still contributing equally to the conversation. I need to learn to listen a little bit better more often. At least that's what my husband keeps telling me. we'll go with that. Okay, so that tree is done. I just need to put in the green now. And I think, oh, one more question from Heather that I didn't answer yet. She wanted to know what my most favorite project bag that I have ever made. Oh, and that's a tough one. That is a tough one because you see, the thing is, I only ever make project bags that I love. I choose fabric based on what I like. And this is the beauty of having a partner. And this is again, I won the sister-in-law lottery. I have two wonderful sister-in-laws. My husband's sister lives in Italy, and so we don't get to spend a lot of time together. But my sister-in-law, Kathy, who I've talked about many, many times, lives here in Ontario, my brother's wife. And my brother married someone who I would have chosen myself because she's a musician, she's crafty, and she's just all around awesome. And I love her. And you'll see her on Friday Off the Grid as well. Occasionally, you'll see her daughter Clara pop into a video or two, or sometimes an Instagram picture because she's the cutest little girl ever. And she's learned how to stitch. So she's amazing. So Kathy, the beauty of having two people running a business together who get along really well, and the exact same is true with the Fiber Friends. When we make a kit, we all have slightly different taste. And so Kathy chooses fabrics and combinations that she loves, and she's got great taste. But she tends to choose things that I don't normally gravitate towards. And so I choose things that I love and things that I would want to keep myself. And that's how I choose my fabrics. And then together, we both make whatever bags we want. And that's what gets put up in the shop. And because we both have different taste, there's usually something in there that appeals to a wider variety of people than if it were just me putting things that I like in there. And my friend Adrienne, we just had this conversation this morning because when we develop the Fiber Friends kits, what that is it's four times a year we come out with a major kit, and then a few extra times a year we do a mini kit where it's just a bag and a skein of yarn. Adrienne is a yarn dyer extraordinaire, so I'm going to actually plug her Etsy shop here if you'll forgive me. Her yarn business is called Old Oak Yarns, and I am going to link that. I'm going to put that in the drop down box. I'll put a little link to her shop in the drop down box. I'm not going to be doing any editing on this particular video, but go and check her yarn out. She has wonderful color sense. But again, she has slightly different taste in fabrics than I do. But when you're making a kit together, I think it's important that everybody's on the same page, and that because she has to dye the yarn for it, it's nice that she likes the fabric that we're making the bags from. And so we were at the fabric store this morning choosing the yarn for our next kit, and it was really quite interesting how our styles varied, yet there was always something that we could both agree on together. So that was a very long-winded way for me to answer poor Heather's question about what my favorite project bag is that I've ever made, wasn't it? That's ridiculous. My favorite project bag that I have ever made, out of any bag that I've ever made, is probably the very first large handled, excuse me, the large handled bag that I ever made that I kept for myself because it was, I chose fabric that I had been squirreling away for a couple of years, and fabric that had been a birthday present from my mom and dad. And so it was very special fabric to me. And it was the first time that I learned how to put straps on a bag. And we puzzled out exactly the dimensions of the bag, how the structure of the twill would work on the bottom of it. And I just remember it being a lovely afternoon spent with Kathy at the cottage, learning how to make figuring out how to make this particular style of bag that we wanted to be able to offer. And And in fact, we had gotten a custom order from a lady who, one of my favorite ladies that I've met through Evertotes, who tends to buy lots of bags. Anyways, I won't say your name just in case. I don't want to make you feel like I'm outing you for buying lots of bags. But it was because of this particular customer who wanted a bag with straps that we had decided, okay, let's puzzle this out. Let's make a really great bag that has straps, that's sturdy, that feels good. And so spending that afternoon making that bag with my favorite fabric, and I put a hot blue zipper in the top of this gorgeous black and white fabric, and it turned out better than I ever could have hoped. And so that was my very favorite project bag, and I use it all the time. It's still my favorite project bag, and I'll put a picture of it in here so you can see it. And I guess that's it. That's it for questions. The only other thing that I can think of that I really wanted to bring up today was there was a question posed on the Stitch Mania group last week. And look at me, I have done 0 stitching now because really I have to concentrate for everything that's coming after this. So I'm just going to finish what I'm saying, and then I'm going to log off, get this loaded up so that you guys can stitch with me. And then tonight I'm going to start posting. I'm going to check out the Instagram story function a little bit more tonight and see if I can do some live posting through there during, the evening tonight, and see what I can do there. Anyways, again, distracted here. There was a question posed on Stitch Mania about what the heck is off the grid. I've been seeing off the grid all over the place, and I have no idea what it is. What are they talking about? Is it, moving from Aida fabric to linen? Is it, not gridding your fabric anymore? What the heck is it? And so, Crafty Kim tagged me in the post so that I was able to answer her question. Lots of other people jumped in and answered the question as well, which was really, really great. And so someone had said they thought that off the grid had something to do with my cottage. And so I just thought, for people who are new here, who have not watched the videos that I posted last summer, you probably have 0 clue as to why my channel is called Off the Grid Needlearts. So I just thought I would take a really quick moment and explain that in the summertime, my family, myself in particular, and my kids, more so my son now, my daughter who is older now, spends a lot more time in the city. But we have a small cottage on an island up in Georgian Bay. And this is where my father-in-law and mother-in-law bought some property way back in the 1960s. And we are fortunate that they allowed us to build on some of the land up there. And my husband built the cottage himself. He cleared the land himself. He designed the cottage himself. He built the cottage himself with the help of our handyman, who came up for, I believe he was there for a month total over the period of time. Friends and family helped. My daughter was there with a screwdriver, and my husband paid her 10 cents to pick up every loose screw that she could find on the ground. It was a true testament to the ability and capability that my husband has for these types of things. He certainly has no training or background in any of that. He has a master's in geography, and for the last 25 years has been running a small business in London with computers. And so this is really, that's the kind of man he is. If there's something he wants to learn how to do, he figures it out, he learns how to do it, and he puts his mind to it, and he gets it done. And so he built us a small cottage on the land that's up there, and it's perfect. It is the perfect size. It is small, it is cozy, it is my favorite place in the world. And when we are there, it's an island. There is no power. There is no electricity. There is no nothing. So, which I realize is a double negative. But anyways, we use propane for our lights and our stove and our fridge. That is the biggest use of propane. And then we have solar panels that we use to charge our electronics and run my sewing machine. And I also have an LED light that I use so that I can stitch late into the night at the cottage, and it does not drain our batteries at all. So if you've missed any of that from last summer, that is where the name Off the Grid Needlearts comes from, because that is our favorite place in the whole wide world. And one day when we eventually see our children off into the world to their own devices and their own lives when they are grown, our plan is that we will move to the cottage and that we will either live there year round or spend the vast majority of our time there. And that's our dream. That's our goal. And that's what we're working towards. So Off the Grid Needlearts. There you go. That's the story of that. And I'm looking at the timestamp, and you guys, this is the first time that I have made it past 1 whole hour. 1 whole hour I chatted with you, which was really, really fun. And I got some stitching done. I think I talked way more than I stitched today. So next Friday, I'll be working on my landmark design, and I fully expect to get a lot more stitching done. Anyways, that's it for me today. I'm going to go and get this loaded up on YouTube so that we can all stitch together tonight. I think I might carry on with this tonight. We'll see. Undecided. If my family wants to sit downstairs this evening, then I might work on something different, because I like to keep my floor frame up here in the bedroom. I don't like to take it up and down the stairs. So maybe I'll work on my hands-on design January piece instead. Whatever I'm working on, I will be sharing it on Instagram. There's a hashtag there, hashtag Off the Grid Friday Party, and join in, and so that everyone can see what you're working on. That's it for me today. I will see you on Monday with a regular FlossTube episode. Happy stitching, everyone. Happy weekend. Enjoy all of the other Stitch With Me videos that are out. I know that Letitia will be posting a list in our Facebook group. She has been working on curating a list of all of the people who are currently putting out a Stitch With Me video so that we can all visit together and enjoy each other's stitchy company. Okay? So don't forget, next Friday, 6 p.m. till midnight, it'll be a stitching sit-in, and we'll chat more about that on Monday. Happy weekend, everybody. See you soon.